I am Stephanie Redfeather. I'm the author of The Evolutionary Empath, a practical guide for heart-centered consciousness. And I have a copy in my hands because the publisher just sent it to me, but it's not quite on shelves yet. So it lands on shelves November 5th. You can pre-order a copy now. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Jennifer, for inviting me. There's a couple things I want to do to kind of set the space and settle in before I dive into the content. So you are listening, you've chosen to be here for a reason, and whether that's curiosity or, oh my goodness, you know, leaks are my thing, I can't wait to hear more, whatever reason you're here, thank you. I'm glad that this spoke to you. And I just want to invite you to drop into your body and settle into this space, connect with your guides and helpers. Take a clearing breath and really show up 100% for yourself. When we give ourselves these gifts, it's important that we fully show up to receive what it is that we're giving to ourselves. So I just want to give you a moment to kind of settle in and get ready to receive this information. So I'm assuming a certain level of education, if you will, since this is an empath group. I know that you are familiar with what that is, so I'm not going to really talk about the basics or you know, that sort of thing. That's why I chose this specific subject of energy leaks, because I felt like it was a little more advanced, like I don't have to put as much time into kind of building a foundation to help you understand the content. So let me start by going to the bigger picture, and then we'll dive into how energy leaks apply to all of this. So as empaths, obviously our one of our gifts is that it's easy for us to blend and merge with other people. It's easy for us to take on other people's energy, to feel what they're feeling, to see everything from their point of view. And the corollary to that is that we tend to lose ourselves, that we pop out of our own sovereign space and, you know, occupy or drop our anchor into another person. That is our natural state, our natural inclination. It's harder, it's more challenging for us to stay in our own sovereign space, to establish boundaries, to even understand where we end and the next person begins. And so one of my teachers, one of my mentors said something one time that really stuck with me, and that is, you and I are one, but we are not the same. And so what that refers to is, you know, in spirit form, in the vast cosmic consciousness, we're all made of the same stuff. We're all one. But in the rubber meets the road, human physical body, 3D existence, we're not the same. We are different. Our energetic signature is unique. And so it can be confounding when there's a part of us that remembers what it's like in spirit form to be in a physical body and have to deal with boundaries and edges and protection, if you think of it that way, you know, making decisions, conscious choices about what we expose ourselves to and how we manage our energy field. And so for this discussion of energy leaks, you can think of your energy field, your container, the edges, your boundaries, however you choose to think of it, as semi-permeable. And so at any given moment in the day, there are hundreds of stimuli acting upon our energy field. And those are internal as well as external. So internal can be our thoughts, belief systems, values, our state of mind, whatever emotions we're feeling, all of those sorts of things. And then all of the external factors of the weather and marketing messages, and are you at home or you know, are you shopping and there's 100 people around you. So all of these things are constantly bombarding us really and affecting our energy field. So our energy fields are dynamic. They are in flux all the time. And the more conscious we can be about recognizing that, understanding it, tending to it, checking in with it, the better ability that we're going to have to maintain a stable energy field, a field that's clear. When we apply our energy hygiene practices, then we're able to stay centered in ourselves, hear our own voice, clear out the things that aren't ours. So energy leaks, if we drop down now into this specific topic, can flow in both directions. So we can have energy leaks of us leaking our energy, our life force outward. And there can be leaks of other people's energy coming into our field because it's not fortified enough, or we weren't paying attention to our boundaries. And so that's specifically what I want to talk about right now. So if you think about just simple, those two simple directions, I've named them blowout leaks and cave-in leaks. And so I chose those titles because they're pretty obvious which one is which. So blowout leaks are just like, think of a blowout when your tire blows out. It's psh, energy is leaking outward. You're not conscious of what's happening. And let me give you some examples of what energy blowout leaks are. So for example, interrupting other people when they're talking, or talking over other people, not letting them finish before you're already talking, or always needing to have the last word. Whatever the conversation is, you got to say something. There's always something that has to be said. Related to that, having comments on everything everyone says. And comments aren't necessarily verbal words. I'm sure you've seen people who they have to laugh, or they yeah, woo, or just make noises. Something is coming out of their mouth, a sound, an emotion, or even just making faces. That's still energy moving outwards. Being pushy, getting in other people's faces, kind of being close talkers, standing too close, or ones that always got to, have their arm around you, or patting you, that sort of thing. So that relates to touching or invading other people's spaces, which is another example of blowout leaks, where you're doing it without their permission. You're invading their space, or you're touching them, or energetically invading their space without their permission, or without waiting for their answer. I've got an example that I'll give you where that this relates to. Blowout leakers are also the types who have to tell their story, whatever's going on, and they have to tell it multiple times. And so they're sharing every experience, every conversation, every crisis with everyone they know. So their hairdresser, the person next to them in line at the grocery store, and then the checkout person at the grocery store, and then the person they run into in the parking lot at the grocery store, and their neighbor and their manicurist and everybody else. And usually they're having the conversation or sharing the issue with everyone except the person or people they probably should be having the conversation with. Another example would be being overly protective of someone. And so this one may not be obvious. This one is more of a subtle energetic feel. So being overly protective of someone, think of kind of energetic claws coming out and gripping a person. And related to this is being smothering or clingy, like hovering, constantly having to give advice or give direction, not being able to leave someone alone. So that's a little bit more obvious. But energetically, you can still be a blowout leaker when you sort of have your energetic claws. Like, you may not be saying anything, but the person is aware that they still feel their influence in your field. Another example is not allowing someone their own process or their own space. And honestly, this is something that we're not taught very well, at least in Western society, is that we are very uncomfortable with other people's discomfort. And so when we don't recognize that in ourselves, a lot of times our natural instinct is like, oh, here, clean it. Do you need? Okay, clean it. pat, pat, you know, hug, hug, everything's okay, you know, and you can just see by what I'm doing, it's kind of like, back off, get out of my space. You know, when we are having a process, when we need to cry, when we need to emote, almost always what we need from the other person is for them to just be there with us, to witness us and to hold space. And all of this, shh, it's okay, pat, pat, here's a Kleenex, actually shuts our process down. Other examples include leaking sexual energy. So this is a specific form of life force energy leaking. So leaking sexual energy in the form of inappropriate flirting, or using sexuality for manipulation or seduction, or trying to you know, get something you want through that sexual influence. So basically, anything that has to cause the other person to set a boundary with you is an example of a blowout leak. And there are more examples. I didn't cover all of them. There's more examples that I include in my book. So I just need to switch screens here for just a moment. So in a blowout leak, think of your energy like water leaking out of holes in an above ground pool, or water leaking out of a hole in a bucket. So what's happening in these situations is the person is not containing their own life force energy. They're not being conscious, they're not being deliberate in what they're saying or how they're behaving, and a lot of times what they're even thinking. So they're letting their energy, in the form of their words and behaviors and actions, leak out all over everyone else, and they're not being responsible for the effects or the consequences. So that is blowout leaks. So now I want to give you, I'm going to switch gears and go the other direction. So we're going to talk about cave-in leaks. And so again, just like the word implies, a roof caving in, cave-in leaks are energy that we allow into our field from the influence of other people or things or situations. So some examples of cave-in leaks: letting other people manipulate us into doing something that we don't want to do. This could be, you know, guilt, blackmail, bully, intimidation, whatever technique it is. We don't have the fortified field, the strong enough boundary to not let that come in and invade our field. Another example, allowing people and situations in your life that drag you down, that sap your energy, allowing energy vampires. I mean, I think we've all had that coworker or person that as soon as they come into the room, it's just like, you know, you can just feel that, you know, that their vacuum cleaner, if you were their energy vacuum cleaner, is just on full suck, if you will, and they are just pulling life force energy from everybody that they can, and so it just collapses the field. Another example, not standing up for yourself, not stating your point of view or your opinion, which, you know, the corollary to that is basically just deferring to the other people, whatever they want, whatever they think, whatever their opinion is. So you're not stating your own truth, and sometimes that's because you don't know what your own truth is. That's a different discussion, but essentially deferring to the other person, whether that's your spouse or, you know, you're going out in a social group and it's like, okay, whatever everybody else wants, or whatever your boss wants, even if you don't agree, etc. Not asking for what you need, want, or desire. And that usually stems from issues with deservedness, like not believing you're worthy, not trusting yourself. And it also can stem from having shut those internal communication systems down for so long that you can't even recognize anymore what it is that you need or what you want. So it still represents this collapse. A cave-in leak can be drawing a boundary and then collapsing, you know, so people who make a decision and then they renege, or they draw a line and they're like, okay, sorry, I was just kidding, I don't mean it, you know, like they can't hold that energy of that boundary. It's too intense, it's too much, it's too, it triggers too many things, and then they just let that boundary collapse. Allowing other people to define who you are. So you can see there's a theme in these. So it's really not having enough courage, not having enough life force energy, not having enough whatever to be able to be who you are, to be your authentic self, to emanate that. And this one, allowing other people to define who you are is kind of the bane of the unconscious empath anyway. So whether you're a cave-in leaker or a blowout leaker, most empaths do have an experience of allowing other people to define them, just because that's part of our time in the unconscious years. And then the last one here is tolerating abuse. So whatever kind of abuse that is, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. So all of these things are examples of cave-in leaks. And so cave-in leaks, think of your container, your energetic container, as a boat. And you're in the water, and the leak is water from the lake or the ocean or wherever you are flowing through the holes into your boat. And so this represents other people's needs, demands, expectations, unconscious thoughts and actions, whatever it is, flowing into your container and overwhelming and collapsing your own sovereign field. So I was going to give you an example in personal life for me of experiencing somebody else's blowout leak. So I have a friend, and when I first met him, he's incredibly intuitive. Like, he can read the energy body. He's a massage therapist and energy healer, and he can just know right where something is. And so we were chatting, and I don't remember what the conversation was, but apparently wherever it was in my body, he could see it immediately, and there was something going on in my thigh, and so he just reaches right over and touches my thigh. I was like, all right then. And so it's honestly, you might find this a lot. I find this frequently because my tribe tends to be energy healers, massage therapists, nurses, healthcare workers, therapists, those sorts of things, where if a person isn't conscious and deliberate with their actions and awareness, they think that because they see a thing, they know a thing, the other person's body is speaking to them, that that's automatically permission to be able to touch or whatever. And it's not. So that's, again, this difference of you and I are one, but we are not the same. In spirit form, different rules of operation, but in physical form, in 3D with a body, you need to ask permission. And he's also one of those that it's like, can I touch you, while he's already moving in to touch you, so he's I don't want to say harmless, but so he's not coming in with malicious intent or sexual intent or any kind of intent to overpower or manipulate. It's just, hey, I see what's going on in you, and bing, there I am, kind of forgetting the manners of the human interaction 3D part. So are you a cave-in leaker or a blowout leaker? Let me say one more thing about that. It's not just one or the other. So you might have listened to that list and gone, yeah, I tend to be more this than that, but there were a few things in that list that applied. Totally normal. That's quite common. Most people aren't just exclusively cave-in or blowout. We tend to have a little bit of each in our experiences. And for most people, they're probably going to have the majority of their leaks in one column. For me, my leaks tend to be cave-in. And so, especially earlier in my years, in my unconscious years as an empath, big part of my journey has been around self-worth and deservedness and speaking my truth and those sorts of things. And so it has taken me time over the years to really be able to have that boundary so that other people's thoughts and beliefs and whatever don't just completely collapse me. So I just want to shift gears here and pause for a moment before I do, because the next piece that I'm going to get into is what I call the remedies. So this is what you do, or what kinds of focus you want to have, or what kind of awareness that you want to cultivate to remedy each of these kinds of leaks. And so I just want to pause for a minute. If you've got a question, throw it up in the chat. And so I'll just pause for a second, see if anything comes up here, and then I'll shift into talking about the remedies, and then we'll wrap up and then have an opportunity for questions there as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on into the remedies. So we'll start first with blowouts. So for blowout leakers, the blowout, if you again just think of it physically, what direction the energy is moving, it's akin to an explosion, if you will. And so the remedy for blowout leaking is containment. And I just want to, some people get triggered by that word because it might have been a favorite phrase of your parents, like, Stephanie, contain yourself. So I don't mean containment in terms of shutting your life force down or quieting your voice or making yourself small. It's simply just, the standard definition of contain, to create a space for. So a containment is about applying a measure of conscious restraint. And the focus is on keeping your energy inside of you, your life force energy, staying inside of your own boundaries, because blowout leakers tend to just blow completely past their own edges into everybody else's space. If you are one who likes to sit with journaling questions or contemplation questions in your meditation, then the questions for you would be, why do I feel the compulsion to interrupt other people or invade other people's space or smother or over nurture or flirt or whatever that is for you? Something else to consider here that I think is important to mention is that sometimes we will leak energy as a way to bleed off our life force because we are not comfortable holding that container if it gets too intense, if it gets too big, if we get too filled up with our own life force. It can be like, oh, I'm too big, I'm going to be seen, I'm too, whatever, like this, so this will go back to messages from childhood, whatever that is for you. Excuse me. But the sheer intensity of your full life force energy is too much for you for whatever reason, and so the leaks can just be like a bleed valve or on a pressure cooker, whatever it is, to let off steam, to let off that energy, to discharge it so that you don't get overwhelmed by the fullness of your life force. It is not uncommon for blowout leakers to have difficulty manifesting, difficulty focusing, difficulty bringing things to completion, difficulty being with other people's discomfort, difficulty speaking about their feelings rationally and calmly instead of blowing up. People who leak energy outwardly tend to overexpress or like I said, bleed that energy off. And what that tends to point to is a need to, again, it comes back to the containment of being able to hold space for themselves. And so people who leak energy outwardly, overexpress or bleed off their energy need to learn to contain their energy and be comfortable with that feeling of holding space for their own life force. Now there's a kind of a simple method that can be applied for people who tend to be blowout leakers, and that is just simply pausing. So the easiest method to learn to build containment is just pausing before you say or do anything, and check in. Why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? Am I being conscious with what it is that I'm wanting to do, this behavior that I'm about to do? Is that important? Is it necessary? Or is it just me kind of being unconscious and not paying attention? So blowout leakers benefit from practicing patience and pacing, because blowout leakers are kind of the sprinters as they call upon their life force energy in bursts. And so that pacing requires that they take the life force energy, apply it in small doses over time to be able to sustain a cause or a dream or bring something into manifestation. Okay, remedies now for cave-in leakers. So we're going the opposite direction. So cave-in leakers, again, it's a collapsing of the energy field, which is akin to implosion as opposed to explosion. And so the focus for cave-in leakers is on fortification of their energy field. So fortifying your energy field is about reinforcing it, you know, like adding stabilizing braces to a building that is collapsing, whatever you need to do to fortify that container. So it helps strengthen it so that the pressures of other people's energies, expectations, opinions, etc. doesn't just crumple your field. Cave-in leakers would benefit from questions about, you know, just like blowout leakers, but, you know, why do I allow other people to take advantage of me? Why do I tolerate this abuse or this inequality or this unfairness? Why is it so difficult for me to ask for what I need or stand up for myself? Those are the lines of inquiry for cave-in leakers. So blowout leakers and cave-in leakers both can benefit from learning to hold their life force energy, but for cave-in leakers, it's a different focus. So if we're leaking energy inwardly, it's more of a sign of under-expressing, or, you know, if we can't, it's like if the air pressure in your tire is too low, it's a flat tire. It won't roll. Your car won't drive correctly. And so for cave-in leakers, we can hardly generate enough life force energy or enough air pressure, if you will, to keep our tire, to keep our boundaries inflated. And so strengthening the energy field for cave-in leakers is going to help them learn to build up their life force to prevent outside forces from decimating it. So for cave-in leakers, practicing staying grounded, present, and in their body is going to be very important, because again, it's about, a lot of times cave-in leakers are not running their full life force energy. It's drained, it's bled off, it's gone. They're not fully inhabiting themselves. So oftentimes what comes with that is a sense of, you know, lack of confidence, not feeling like they deserve to be heard, or that they're not important, or their voice doesn't matter. And so those are all just examples of just collapsing and not running enough life force energy. So practicing holding your life force, your passion, your desire, your joy, your voice, your opinions, your values for longer periods of time is going to be important, because it's just like a muscle. You're building up the strength of your container and fortifying it. Okay, so that was a lot of information. I know, I hope that was useful. When I was writing The Evolutionary Empath, the way my process works is I don't always know what I'm going to write about when I sit down. I just start writing, and then things come through. And so Spirit really downloaded this information for me, and I find it so useful and helpful, and I hope that you are finding it useful and helpful as well. So I'm going to pause again I hope I'm not missing comments because I will admit this is my first time doing a live Facebook feed, so forgive me if I'm missing a comment, but I'm looking at the screen. Thank you, somebody's sending me hearts, I appreciate that. So if there are any questions or comments, I'm just gonna pause for a moment and see if anybody has anything, and then I'll wrap up. I'm just gonna get a quick drink here. Okay. All right, so I'm not seeing anything come through, and if I do, I'll pause and answer that. So once again, my new book, The Evolutionary Empath, will be on shelves November 5th. This is something that I actually started writing 3 years ago, and I'm just, Jen, I hope it's okay, I'm just going to take a moment to talk a little bit about the book. I've been an empath my whole life, but for the first 30 years I didn't know it. And so when my spiritual awakening began, there were multiple themes that were happening all at the same time. And a big part of it was learning about myself as an energy being and understanding and accepting that I was an empath. And at that time, there were very few, if any, resources or people that could help me. And I'm sure a lot of you have been there, where it's like, where do I go? Where do I go to find somebody who can explain what's happening to me or give me the tools and skills to be able to navigate life? And so this book is born out of that time for me in what I call the spiritual crucible, and learning how to be not just a functioning empath, but a thriving empath, because I was so codependent and I had no idea where I ended and the next person began, and I took on everybody else's emotions and thought they were mine, and my nervous system was constantly overwhelmed. For those of you who don't know, I was in the Air Force for 10 years. So it's an interesting story. I started out, as a very intuitive, creative child. I went to a creative and performing arts school, and then fast forward a few years and I get a math degree and become an Air Force officer. So there's some serious fodder right there, let me tell you, for some interesting life experiences. So the book is in 2 parts. Half of the book gives you the basic isn't the right word, the rubber meets the road tools of how to be an empath in a body on this planet right now, boundaries, energy hygiene, self-care, understanding the masculine and feminine archetypes and how those play in and why those are important. But the first half of the book goes into the context of why we are here as empaths, and we're not a random event. I have called all of us who are here right now collectively the empathic Big Bang. We are here on purpose, and we have a very specific mission and point for being here. And so that's what I talk about in the beginning of the book, as well as go into a very detailed definition of what an empath is. So lots of cool stuff there. I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. My website is bluestartemple.org. So if you're not watching this live and you catch it later and you have some questions, please feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you. Thank you. Have a blessed day.